Hello and welcome to the Paper Prototypes podcast. I'm here with SliceBar. SliceBar, is there a different name you'd like me to call during this recording?
SliceBar or Dan's fine, whichever, really. Whatever's easiest. Dan's
Ah,
probably less of a mouthful, so.
alright, so I'll go with Dan. You can call me Rex throughout the recording. And so, Dan, let's get started. Tell me about yourself and tell me about your game, Astra Protocol 2.
Myself, I'm a hobbyist developer, former professional developer, but I've not done it for about 7 years professionally. Everything I do is just hobbyist, so spare time. Um, Astra Protocol 2, it's a sequel to Astra Protocol, surprisingly, and it's cassette futuristic space adventure where you control the terminal of a spaceship, but heavily influenced by the films and I suppose even the computers of the 80s. So you're not going into it expecting all this high sci-fi stuff. You're running on like an 8-bit microcomputer, so you have to type all the commands. You have to make sure the syntax um, is correct, and it's very much you're battling the interface just as much as you're battling enemy spaceships, I suppose.
So, something that I found particularly interesting is if I went on the Steam Workshop, there is a principal guidebook that you wrote for your game. And there's also some instructions on how to get it working on a floppy drive. Can your game actually run on a floppy drive?
The game is I think last calculation was about 860 kilobytes in size. So yeah, if you happen to have a floppy drive in this day and age, yeah, you can run it off a floppy drive. Um, it won't work on a computer which probably has a floppy drive in it unless you have like a modern USB floppy drive or something like that. So it's yeah, despite maybe some of the pictures you've seen, anything which involves old hardware is very much it'll run on an old monitor, but that monitor is connected to a modern computer.
So, how do you want people to play your game? Do you want people to use the help command when you get into the game, or did you want people to use the guidebook that you typed up for it?
Yeah, so that's actually a kind of a development point that came out of it. I suppose I'll get there via a long route. So the game actually started off. I just wanted to have the space adventure, but I found that there was a lot of elements of working out how to fly your craft started to make it a bit more fun, and felt a lot more powerful. I'd be playing it, testing it myself, playing the game for 5 minutes, crashing into a planet, and then it got to a point when I was actually being able to fully control the ship, and that's when I felt, wow, this is actually like I've got somewhere. Um, so the learning element is a good part of it, and I suppose arguably the manual is probably the best way to play it because if you happen to have two screens or a printer, you can print it out. And you have it there at your side, and it's a hark back to the old games of the 80s and to some extent the 90s as well, where you would have the manual that told you how to play it, but you could always read that like in the car on your way home after buying it, or if you couldn't get on the computer, yeah, read through the manual. And there's an element of, I'm not sure if it's role playing or meta element to it. It's supposed to almost kind of be, well, the manual's written in universe style, so it's kind of supposed to be you're like a graduated captain. That's your user guide, well, operating system manual. So the manual is probably the best way to do it, but obviously not everyone has access to a printer. Not everyone has access to dual screens and stuff. So that's why you have the in-game help. But yeah, so long story short, the manual is the preferred way to play it, but you can play it with the help.
Is that why you made the help command really slow to come up because you wanted to push people towards using the guidebook, or is that just a matter of trying to recapture that feel of the old '80s computers?
It's a mix. Yeah, the help's not deliberately slow. It's just that the help works using pretty much every other system that is kind of slow, and it just happens to be that the help is a very text-heavy screen, um, and the engine is designed to essentially do a line of text per frame, and it just happens to be really slow um, when you try and use the help. Although, yeah, you could argue that yeah, it is to push towards the manual is probably the better way to do it, but the help's just there as like in a pinch, I suppose. Um, I have had some feedback saying could I speed up the help, so I'm gonna look into some options around that. Because whilst yes, I do want to kind of have it all in universe, there has to be that fine line between actual frustration and in universe frustration, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I get it. I think that was I think one of my biggest frustrations playing was trying to boot up the help menu was every single time I forgot a command was frustrating until I watched a let's play where someone pointed out that there was a in universe help guide, and then I was able to get a lot further in the game.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that it was pointed out. I've tried to make the manual a bit more clearer, but it's one of these things where everything about the game itself is designed to be kind of you are like a space captain. So it's almost as if you were to go on your computer yourself, like Windows or whatever. Windows doesn't really have a tutorial telling you how to use Windows. So certain stuff that's supposed to be known. So it's drawing that fine line between not breaking the in-universe aspect, but then at the same time telling people, look, there is a manual that you need to read, or um, you're going to get a lot further with it.
What was your initial inspiration for creating this game?
So there's a lot of things really. So obviously it's the sequel to Astra Protocol, and that's the biggest one of it. But I suppose it's a mix between the film Alien. There's kind of a good couple of scenes in that where you get to see the tech that they're using, and it is heavily influenced by the tech of the sci-fi films of the 70s and 80s. They're doing this really fancy, complex. They're traveling through space, but you look at the computer that they're using, and it's like less powerful than like a modern mobile phone, for instance. So it was kind of the contrast between the high tech and the low tech. Um, but I think subconsciously there was an element to it where, um, growing up, my family had an Amstrad CPC 464, which was a relatively popular microcomputer over here in the UK. And whilst I was too young to experience it kind of in the 80s, it was just sticking around and we'd occasionally fire it up. And there was a game on that called Tau Ceti, which I think it's relatively obscure. As in, I forgot the name of it until I found it on like an eBay listing. Then I was just browsing through, um, and that had the kind of similar elements to it, that it was half text or partial text adventure, but then also space adventure at the same time. So I suppose those two things. But again, just the films of the 80s is probably the big one.
So that's where you would get the whole um, how would you describe it? Cassette futurism.
Yeah, and even on that, so like I said, I keep saying this, that it's a sequel, but when I was making Astro Protocol 1, I didn't know that the term cassette futurism existed. So I was describing it to everyone as, the tech of the 80s, like the tech of Alien, the tech of this, which was quite long-winded. But then I can't remember how I stumbled upon it, but I found the term cassette futurism, and I was like, yes, this is exactly what I'm going for.
I've driven up prototypes of games because I don't know. There's something about like the old bulky computers. I love taking them apart whenever they come in the PC shop because there's just something about how they look in the way to run all the separate games you needed, you'd have to like get a floppy drive for the OS and then pull that drive out and put another drive in. I always thought was so fascinating. But the word I've always heard for it was cassette punk, similar to something like what steampunk was, diesel punk, and then you get cassette punk, which is like 1970s, 80s esque um, technology, which is pretty, I guess, interesting. Um, would you say that you're one of the few games that are really experimenting with the idea of like cassette futurism or cassette punk?
Uh, Now this is like it's a tricky one. I mean, I've not done a lot of research into the game, so it was very much a this is an idea I've had. I'll run with it. Oh, it's got something behind it. I'll develop it a bit further. So I, I can't say that I am. I've heard of other stuff. There's a game called I think Duskers, which shares some concepts to it. There's also obviously like Alien Isolation is very much that, but I'd say that there's very few modern games I think that have a similar uh, full-on style to it. You'll see elements of cassette futurism in even um, modern culture. Just for reference, I saw the film Lightyear, what about 6 months ago, and obviously that's not a game, but every time you see their kind of in-universe UI when they're controlling the spaceships, it is very much cassette futurist. It's that whole amber on black or whatever you want to call it. So there's still elements of it here and there. But yeah, without having done a full-on research, I don't want to say yes, I'm the only one that does this, but it definitely has its own little kind of niche or branch or offshoot. Um, yeah.
So, was there any other sci-fi stories that might have inspired you, especially considering the lore of your game with the oh, I forget what they're called, the heliosaurs that come after your ship, and the I think you recently added, was it a black hole in the new patch you added?
Yeah, so I think the biggest kind of influence I will say is the Warhammer 40,000 universe. I play that and stuff. However, I wouldn't say my universe is horrific as that.
No, I don't
Um,
think it is.
and up until the Heliosaurs, I think the game was very much a science fiction game. So it was a plausible um, situation that you were in. It's ships. There's not really any or nothing anything too exotic. There's no warp drives or jump drives or anything like that. So realistically, the only thing that kind of was the fiction element of it was, I suppose, the shields. And even then, we have uh, force fields have been created just at, I think it's like at microscopic levels. Um, so so yeah, but I mean, like a lot of the films from, like I said, the 70s and 80s, Alien, uh, Star Wars, to some extent Star Trek. But the heliosaurs itself is actually a concept that my one of my friends, and I got his agreement to use the heliosaurs in this. That he was actually making a game for the Master System, and I think a heliosaur was the enemy in that. Um, it was kind of a bit of a nod to him. I was like, "Do you mind if I use this as just a thing?" And initially, it started off as just a little Easter egg in uh, a communication that pops up. I think it's just like someone says heliosaurs have got into the engines again, and that was it. But I just ran with it a bit more, and I thought, well, I've got a bit more time for this new patch. Let's just see if we can get them in. Something that worked, some alien migratory species that um, not necessarily antagonistic, but worked as just as a bit of an environment thing, that something else that just makes it a bit more interesting flying through space.
Yeah, you don't want to kick a hornet's nest and summon a swarm of heliosaurs.
Yeah, exactly. And to be honest, I'm amazed at how well they actually the how well the implementation came out. Um, yeah, just things like blasting up an asteroid, which if you played a previous patch, you just blast up in an asteroid. Like, oh, I'm just going to test out my missiles. There's an asteroid there. I'll fire at it. Boom, asteroid's gone. Wow. Um, Whereas now you blast it open, and then this horde of angry space lizards just comes flying at your ship, and which means you have to react. So yeah, definitely a fun implementation.
How did you come up with the art style? I'm guessing I wasn't really around for a lot of the old 80s computers, so I'm guessing the Ogborn color came from the fact that a lot of those computers did have that color.
Yeah, and that's it basically. I mean, the main art style came from the fact that I can't really draw. Um, there's no real everything's essentially just uh, geometric shapes. You know,
I
a
always
planet's
spit take at that.
a planet's a circle, or a planet with a ring is a circle in a donut. Like a landmine, I think, is a circle with or a space mine in this case is a circle with a cross through it. A space station is a donut with a cross in it. Um, Even the heliosaurs are just because essentially you're viewing it on a scanner. It's just a triangle. The complex stuff really was just the ships, but again, the ships don't animate because you're looking at it from either a schematic or a scan view. So it took me a bit of time to come up with some interesting ships, but again, from that point, 40K was to some extent an inspiration on that, but also back to the cassette futurism stuff. I tried to make it so that all ships were more or less practical. You'd have your engines at the back because the engines need to push you forward. There's a big chunk of metal at the front of the ship, which means that if it were to get hit by asteroids or debris, they'd bounce off it. Um, yeah, just so that is like I said, that is the art. And then UI design is relatively straightforward, um, but I could also almost have a little bit of a crutch to lean on that any bad UI design, it's like, well, in the 80s, there wasn't really a user experience, user interface design field. So if it's bad UI, well, that's just what you had in the 80s.
How hard was it coming up with the UI layout, especially with I mean, some of it is pretty complex, switching between F1, F2, F3, F4. One of the layouts you get like all the missiles and all that stuff. Did you have like a menu layout designed and then you built the ship from that, or did you build all the ideas from your spaceship and then came up with a UI for it?
Yes, so some elements of it were from Astra Protocol 1, mainly the helm. The helm was probably the easiest one to implement. You have your little window that shows you your local view, and then your controls on how to fly the spacecraft. Um, then you had the science screen. That was also another one which was relatively easy to do. A large zoomed out map, smaller map in the top corner to give you your local view, so you could always have a rough idea of what's going on, and then just a readout. Um, Things like uh, the weaponry screen, a little bit of that evolved over time. So initially, yeah, there was the shields they were needed and the missile status, which had to go through a few revisions because of font sizing and fitting it all into a relatively small amount of space. But a lot of the stuff kind of ended up appearing because I thought, oh, this would be cool. Um, like I can't remember. I think it's the game. I want to say Red Zone on the, the Sega 32X. I saw a video of someone just playing through that, and it had this little kind of reactive reactive radar, reactive HUD. I can't remember the exact name of it, but which showed enemies' positions relative to you. And I literally just saw that and I thought that'd be cool to put in the weaponry screen. The weaponry screen's got a bit of a kind of dead bit of space. Just shove it in there. So certain elements of it were planned, certain elements of it were just this would be cool, shove it in, or and I've got a bit of dead space, shove it in there. The engineering screen was the worst for that. There was so much dead space on the engineering screen because certain bits I knew that you needed, and then other bits of it were just kind of, what do I put here? Um, so yeah, not much planning to it, which I think was kind of a theme that you might see running throughout this game, to be honest.
What big changes did you make jumping from Astra Protocol 1 to Astra Protocol 2?
So yeah, so Astra Protocol One was Astra Protocol One was essentially a lockdown project. The first few months of lockdown in the UK, we couldn't go out, we couldn't see people. Um, so I literally just thought I'll make a space game that's relatively simple and try and do all this stuff. But the scope of that was always supposed to be this is just a 3 month or a relatively quick lockdown project to see what I can do with, which meant that I had a lot of stuff on the cutting room floor. Um, for example, homing missiles. I tried to get homing missiles in, and it just took forever to try and implement it. And I was like, this is taking me far too much time for what it is. Um, so it was left. And eventually, I ended up with this big pile of work that was these are all really cool features, but it never got into Astra Protocol One. How do I get them in there? And I think the biggest change overall was going from Astra Protocol 1, where you were essentially a one man ship with one screen, arguably two screens, you have a map, to um, a to a big, powerful vessel, a lot slower, a bit more plodding, but then you have the time and you have to manage the multiple screens. So, the engineering screen came in, the weaponry screen came in, um, all things like that.
How did you come up with the hook for Astra Protocol? Because the first thing I thought of when I read that distress message was it kind of reminded me of I don't remember if this is true or not, but I've heard a lot of ships out on sea that if they see a sinking ship, they're required to stop and check for survivors and make sure that there are people that if they can be rescued to rescue.
Um, yeah, so again, it's kind of the distress message for Astra Protocol One was basically just why are you in outer space without any resources and everyone's attacking you? Well, you've lost everything. Just survive. And I built a kind of some sort of story off that. Really, it was just some flavor text to make it act like why is it that you need to survive in outer space with nothing around really. And then Astra Protocol 2 was very much a revisit that initial storyline. Really, I say storyline. It's Astra Protocol 1. That bit of text at the start, that is your story. Um, and Astra Protocol 2 was just you've received this message, but this message was never intended for you. What is this message? Find out what this message means.
Okay, that's interesting. I thought it was kind of like you're just a ship stopping, and then you just get the distress beacon. And it's like, well, now I'm legally required to do this shit. Fuck. That's what I thought was happening to my captain. Is that he's just really pissed. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's in Astra Protocol 2 is yeah, I suppose it is. You have been told to investigate it, but at the end of the day, both games are kind of a bit of a sandbox. Do what you want in them.
what was it
So the
like?
story was sorry.
Oh, sorry. Continue.
I was just saying that the story in Astra Protocol 1 is very light. The story in Astra Protocol 2, again, it's relatively light, but it's a little bit more fleshed out.
So, How do you feel about when new players boot up the game? There's no tutorial, there's no help. It's just good luck. Because the first time I booted up the game, um, I saw the type bar, and I just went fuck, and just sat there thinking about what to do until like 5 minutes later. I was like, I guess I could try help. That's a command that works, and that's when I could get started.
Yeah, it's not for everyone. That's for definite. And there's been a few posts on Steam around it. And I think, like I said, I wanted to try and get everyone to know about the manual before starting the game, which can be hard to do. Um, so yeah, it is a tricky one. But then on the flip side, I have had a few people that have just said like, "This is just brilliant." You know, I love the fact that I have no idea what I'm doing. I saw a playthrough, um, and one guy basically said, "It's brilliant the fact that a ship spawned next to me, and before I had a chance to do anything, like he was firing at me, which made me have to think on my feet, and just start typing stuff and working out how things work."
It. I think of me and my girlfriend who I try to show her New Vegas, and she like had to stop multiple times because she gets frustrated and be like, I don't know what I'm doing, and just immediately quit. But then she tried to show me Last of Us, and I just thought the handholdy like bit at the very beginning was just so slow. I would just drop out. So it's just kind of funny how like your game's like thrown, I guess I would say like in the extreme, and that's gonna really gravitate towards certain players. But are you afraid that you might lose too many players due to that, I guess, rough intro where they truly feel lost? That there might be too many people that boot up and go, I'm not sure this is really for me before they can really sink their teeth in because they might be intimidated.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I definitely experienced that. A lot of the people I got to test it. Well, I say a lot of. I got a handful of people to test it. A lot of them said they had no clue what they were doing, but you know, it boots fine, and everything like that. But it, and this is what I said about before with the whole tutorial. It's meant to try and be in universe, like a simulator to some extent. And that's the thing that, with me being a hobbyist, it's not as big an issue for me because if this game doesn't sell, um, I've only really lost the time that I spent building the game, which I was doing for fun anyway, and the Steam fee. Um, I deliberately built it in such a way that I wasn't expecting a financial success. So putting off people, um, whilst disappointing, it's not a kind of it's not a major concern. Um, and I don't want this to sound kind of derogatory or being snooty or anything like that, but it's kind of, if it puts people off too much at the start and they're not willing to play it, then it probably isn't the game for them because the learning how to fly under pressure is a strong element to the game. And and that's what the kind of it ended up evolving into, that it is very much a don't have a clue what you're doing, maybe fly for 2 minutes, realize that you haven't turned your engines off, or realize you've turned your engines off but you're in outer space, so you're still actually moving forward, crash into a planet, try again, sort of thing. So yeah, but and again, harking back to my inspiration from the 80s, um, there were so many games that you'd sometimes boot up, and unless you reacted within, a few seconds, an enemy would just kill you, and that was it. And back in the 80s, when you sometimes had to wait, at least over in the UK, games were on tapes. Um, you could end up waiting for about 5+ minutes for a game to load, only to then die within 5 seconds. And if that put you off, you're like, well, I've wasted 5 minutes to get to this point. I either have to persevere and try again, or I have to find something else. But if that's your pocket money that you spent on the game, it's like, well, this is the game that I've got. I have to kind of power through. So again, it's harking back a little bit to the whole 80s way of doing things. Um, so yeah, but I think my kind of response to that is that if people really are getting stuck, it is nice to maybe help or just like ask or look around. I did want that kind of, to not sound too pretentious, meta element to it with the manual, or just trying to work out things around it. But like you can't necessarily please everyone. But yeah, I suppose this is probably on the um, kick 'em into the sea and see if they swim approach.
Well, you answered my next question in that response, which was going to be, are you worried about it being too niche to support? But I guess since it's just a hobbyist plan, all you're really just trying to really appease to that niche little community that you're building.
Yeah, definitely. And it's a niche that I didn't really know existed before I started making the game. Um, but I think I suppose the biggest downside to it is I think a lot of the niche. So there is a cassette futurism Reddit that screenshots and stuff of the game were relatively well received from, but I'm not sure how many of them are actual game players. Similarly, I think a lot of the niche that it would apply to are some of the old microcomputer fans. But then, how do you approach them with essentially what is a modern game? So it's not. I'm not saying, oh yeah, this game will run on your microcomputer, because it won't. But if you want to experience something like that, but in the modern times, it is something. But how do you do that? So yeah, so getting an audience is definitely difficult, and if I was to do this professionally, this game I believe is far too niche in its format to have any real success.
What's it? How's it been interacting with your community? Because I see you posting on Twitter, and I've also seen you post quite often in YouTube comments underneath Let's Plays.
Yeah, so I don't have a vocal community really, which makes it quite difficult to get any kind of real direction or know how things are going. Um, so yeah, so posting on Twitter, um, Twitter's the main source I think where I try and put stuff out, because you can mix text with images, and it's easier to connect things. We do have an Instagram account, um, but I find that getting any real meaningful interaction from Instagram is difficult, because at least on Twitter, if someone likes your post or if someone retweets it, someone else might see that. Whereas on Instagram, it is very much in its own kind of little bubble. Um, and also, one thing which is quite frustrating is I believe that because Instagram's owned by Facebook, Astra Protocol are part of trigger words for COVID, because there's the AstraZeneca COVID protocol, and so a lot of my posts get tagged as um, related to COVID, which which can be a bit off-putting, and some people, I'm not sure if the algorithm does anything, but I've definitely seen a few posts saying go see a doctor, or not is it misinformation posts to stop people posting COVID misinformation. Um, so that's a thing on it. But yeah, and posting on the Let's Plays, again, that's just to try and kind of build a bit of a rapport with the guys that play Astro Protocol, because it's there's not a lot of people there, and the guy that does do the Let's Play, that I interact with quite a lot. I never approached him. Um, it's not that's not a like, oh, will you play my game and you get the game for free. I just stumbled upon that video of him playing it, and so what chiming in here and there is good to maybe just at least build up a bit of a rapport, or it helps me, it helps me get feedback as well, um, from from their experience of things.
How's that experience of being able to go on YouTube, see your game pop up, and watch someone just struggle and die within 15 minutes and start again?
It's um, I usually have a massive grin watching it because as the developer, I know that there's certain things that they need to do, and seeing them make that connection is just it's really good. Where they're saying, "Oh, I don't understand what I'm doing here." Um, like I think one of the for a few of the videos, the guy was trying to fly to a position in space, um, but he kept going like miles away because he was thinking it was an absolute position.
I remember that, yeah.
And then he triggered, oh, it's a relative position, and it was just like that click that another piece of how to play the game has fallen into place. But I think the biggest one was he had a little cheat sheet, and he made a bit of a mistake when he wrote the cheat sheet, which meant that one of the commands wasn't written properly, and he was really struggling to work out how to use essentially a core feature of the game. So I did go onto his video and gave him a very slight nudge um, in the right direction. Not to say you're using the wrong commands, but I was saying like just double check your manual because something you're having an issue with might be solvable there. And then he solved it, and again but that was because it was something that, like I said, he wrote on his cheat sheet to help him out playing the game, which I think is brilliant that someone wrote their own cheat sheet. That's sort of the stuff that I wanted with the meta element to it. You don't have to have the big manual if you have your little cheat sheet, but to build the cheat sheet, you have to read the manual and work out what's worth keeping and stuff. So
it,
yeah, it's just fantastic to watch someone playing it and improving on it.
it reminds me, I've seen where people complained there isn't like a journal for Elden Ring and there's no icons. So players started keeping their own like journal by their computer so they could write down notes. Or I don't know if you've seen Stardew Valley, um, where you could just look up the wiki to learn like where some people will be on a Tuesday to give them their favorite gift. But I've seen people create like Excel spreadsheet like things in journals and keep track of like all the villagers. It's always
That's
really.
it. Is
Hmm?
it is. It's brilliant just watching the creativity of some people. One of the games, excuse me, um, if you heard of the if you heard of the Fantasy Star series.
Uh, oh shit! It's is it like an MMO?
I think it is now, but it started off as a JRPG on the Mega Drive or Genesis. Oh, well, actually on the Master System.
I'm not
Um,
too familiar with it.
but essentially, you'd have some first person maze segments, but the game never gave you a map. So a lot of people back in the late 80s would essentially have like graph paper and draw their own maps to work their way out through these mazes. It's Yeah, it's just brilliant just watching the sort of the creativity that people come up with to work things out.
So, if you could have, I guess like you could create your own fictional streamer, right? What would be your dream layout to watch him play? Like space helmet, CRT monitor, sleeper build computer. Like what would you like to see meta wise for someone for their your dream Astra Protocol 2 stream?
Yeah, I think you're pretty much right with that. You'd probably have to be streaming not the game, but kind of over the shoulder of them playing it with the whole, CRT, flight stick, big chunky keyboard. Um, yeah, that sort of setup where yeah, because it's a semi RPG element where you are the captain. It's not you're playing as a captain, as in like you are the captain. You're directly controlling the ship. You're viewing everything from a captain's perspective. It's not I'm going to engineering and then that's like an engineering rundown. That's literally your engineering view of what's going on your ship. Um, and that's how you have to work everything out like that. So watching a player from that point of view, I suppose maybe you could argue that it'd be good to, and the game doesn't currently support this, or a multi-monitor mode would be pretty cool to have. All six screens, six separate CRTs, just all kind of around the player, like a proper command like deck. Um, Sort of thing. That'd be pretty cool.
It's funny how, given the price of CRTs now, that might be like a multi-$1,000 setup.
Yeah,
I still can't believe CRT prices have blown up like they have. But
yeah. It's especially when people are just tossing them out like a few years back.
yeah, we had some a shop I worked at before the current one. They like just a bunch came in broken. I was like, okay, I've never seen one of these before, and I junked it. And on the inside had like a cathode ray tube, and it's pretty fucking cool to open to see what the monitors used to look like. But final question: what do you think is it that draws people to retrofuturism, especially for people that didn't have nostalgia for the type of technology that the game features?
Yeah, so we demoed the game at a relatively local games festival um, at the start of February, and to that we took a CRT. We took an old chunky keyboard. We took a joystick, but the adapter broke, so we didn't actually get to use that. And we actually took a dot matrix printer.
Oh God.
Um, and I'd spent a bit of time beforehand adapting the game so that every time anything printed to the log, it would also print out to the dot matrix printer. Um, Kind of back how things used to work in probably more like the 60s and 70s on computers when screen space was such a premium, they would have to spit it out to a printer. Um, and it was probably skewed. The event itself was probably skewed more towards a younger audience. Um, talking about like um, sub 15-year-olds. So looking at young kids, really. And whilst we did get some interest from some of the parents saying like telling the kids, "Oh, this is what we used to play," um, back in the 80s. It was the younger kids that seemed to be more interested in actually playing it. Like we got very few of the adult. I mean, again, it was a younger audience, so there wasn't that many adults, but it was very much the younger kids that I think picked it up and played it. One kid actually came back for a second go. His mum said like out of everything at the event, he said he wanted to come back to play this game. And I think it's just an element of like the unknown or not necessarily unknown, but semi-familiarity. So it's like it's a bit different, but I kind of recognize it. It's like I recognize that that's a computer because it's got a keyboard, and I recognize that that's a monitor, but I'm expecting monitors to be a few centimeters thick. This thing's like a couple of feet thick. Um, so it's the working out what is this, and then the kind of the stark visuals that it's not bright, but it's got quite a high contrast to it, so it's kind of a bit eye catching. It's a bit like what is this, and maybe it does still, like I said, in Lightyear they have that aesthetic on their screen, so it's very much like, oh, I kind of recognize that because that's a spaceship or it looks like space, but I don't fully understand what's going on. So I think that's where it maybe draws people in the curiosity. as opposed to, had it have been maybe modern 3D with, a 3D ships and all this lot, people might have just been like, oh yeah, that's a space game. Space games aren't necessarily my thing. Um, Walk on. So yeah, it's that kind of not fully understanding what it is draws people in.
Yeah, my girlfriend it's so funny. She saw me playing the game, and she's not the biggest sci-fi person, and she likes those games that are a lot more handholdy. But she saw it, and she's like, "Oh, I really want to play that. Can I can I give it a go at some point when you're done?" Just because the whole aesthetic and idea of it like really intrigued her. And I saw a review. I can't remember what it was. He was talking about animation, and he was talking about how what happens is kids grow up on a certain media, they grow up, and then they're the ones who make the media. So now, you get like a revival of like the 80s, and that brings like a new interest to that genre, so that way when you get the next generation, you still can get that retro feel because they had like a faux sense of nostalgia for something that someone else grew up that was in their media.
Yeah,
But
that's really interesting.
So I wish I could describe why, but I normally have like a strong fascination with like retro futurism or just retro graphics in general, even though I didn't necessarily grow up on those graphics, or I just don't remember them looking that bad. I remember the first time I went back and booted up my PlayStation 2, I was like, "What the fuck is this shit? Why do all the cars look so bad?"
Yeah.
I remember them much better than this, but it's just something I always thought was interesting. But I think I'm done with the interview portion. If you want to talk about what games you've recently been playing.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, with this being my hobby, it's kind of taken a lot of my free time. The easiest one to say, and this might not come as a surprise, is No Man's Sky. Um,
No Man's
just
Sky
been,
is pretty fun, yeah.
yeah, it is, and I think because I'm a big like Skyrim and Fallout fan, and so it does kind of it slots into that kind of there is a mission and you can do stuff, but then at the same time, if you want, you can just go off and do whatever you want. Um, Element to it, and I think maybe unique to well, slightly different to No Man's Sky, although this does I suppose share some elements with Fallout 4, is the kind of the base building and farming aspects of it. Um, and I even watched a video where someone described it as a potentially cozy game. Um, so I think it's there's that, which is a yeah. Um, so that's definitely I've sunk quite a few hours into that relatively. Um, and I think before that, we're going back a while now, but I think Disco Elysium. Um, I started getting into that, and I actually got quite into that, but I had to put it down because I just didn't have the time. And I think it's not a pick up and play one. I think it's very much a you have to kind of be working working through that. Otherwise, you kind of lose elements of the plot.
It's like
Uh,
trying to pick up a book after 6 months, but like 7 times worse.
yeah, exactly. But I'm very much I'm pretty much an almost Switch player. Switch just seems to be my main console to be playing on. I mean, I don't really have a powerful gaming PC, which is Astra Protocol 2. That's why it's not exactly pushing the boundaries of graphics, and that's my main laptop. So yeah, it's just stuff on the Switch. I mean, like before that, my copy of Scott Pilgrim versus the World on Switch finally came through after I think I waited 18 months for that to come from Limited Run Games.
Oh wow.
Um, and unfortunately, by the time it arrived, I think I lost a lot of the buzz around it. I'm fortunate enough to still have it on my PS3, so I fired it up once it was announced on there, and the long wait took it a bit out of me. But I think the turtle was it Turtle Shredder's Revenge. Um, I gave that a good go through as well. So, but I think No Man's Sky is probably the most modern style of game, if that's the right way to describe it, because a lot of the other games are very much a throwback to the games I used to play in my youth. So Disco Elysium is very much a Baldur's Gate style RPG. I mean, it's not the same, but
I
it's similar. And
I've been dying to play Disco Elysium because it looks so well written, but also just really funny. And I love reading the posts about people who don't really realize that they lean fascistically, and then when their character turns out that way, they get like really mad. That, or if you go like if you play as a hardline like kind of fascist leading character, your character starts to get like intrusive thoughts about like a fear of women, which I just think is so funny, but so just interesting to me. How your character can just have like a dynamic personality and like you pretty much piece together your own like id, I guess, or is it ego? I don't remember what the terms are supposed to be.
yeah, I mean, I've only started to scratch the surface on that, but yeah, it's like I think when I first encountered that sort of stuff, I was like, "What's this on about?" Like, what? I think when you start off, it's your like your basic responses or something, and I was like, "What is this?"
Although that one's also going for like a different I not futurism but for a retro, because I believe the background is that it's like a failed communist like takeover, sort of like what happened when Rosa Luxemburg tried to like lead her rebellion like prior to Weimar Germany, which is like right up my alley because I'm a big like 20th century 19th century like history nerd. So I just haven't had the money or time to really like want to sink my teeth into it yet.
Yeah, I think someone's described it as it's like the world, but in like 20 years if things don't change or something like that.
Well, hopefully our world will have that nice, really pretty color palette to it. The way everything looks. What is it, like oil painting almost?
Oh yeah, the art style is brilliant.
And it's like almost everything's like melting, which is like perfect for the fact that you're playing through a character that's so fucking drunk that his mind has melted apart into multiple fragments. So it's just, God, I love that. I haven't even played the game, and I'm like gushing over it.
I mean, hopefully we don't have the disco revival, but
uh, I don't think I've ever listened to disco too much to decide whether I hate it or not.
yeah, no, I think it very much was from what I understand, it's very much a flash in the pan kind of movement. I think it was literally, from what I understand, I think you were there or you weren't. You don't have, yeah, you don't really have any. I suppose it must have its influences in like modern dance music and the like, but
It's mostly just kind of been relegated to a joke, like its system, sort of like New Jersey almost, where the only time you reference it is to make fun of it. That's my knowledge of disco growing up. I remember in the Amazing World of Gumball, like it's a cartoon on Cartoon Network. They travel to like this alternate dimension with all where all the universe's mistakes went, and they find disco and rollerblading lost into it.
oh, amazing.
But No Man's Sky is also on my list because I had to completely rebuild my computer because it was like, okay, time to get the new graphics card. Slot that in. The CPU limited like only let me get about like 50% of my total performance. So I still couldn't play um, Need for Speed Heat, and like um, No Man's Sky just ran so poorly. I could play it, just not very well and on the worst graphics. So then I had to get a new CPU, but the chipset didn't match, so I needed a new motherboard and then a new RAM because the DDR didn't match. Basically, I rebuilt the whole thing from the ground up. And so I have a list of games that I need to go back and play through just so I can crank the graphics to max and see what it's like. And No Man's Sky's up there just because it has the problem where you hit like 5 planets that are fucking horrible and boring and I don't care. And then you find the one planet that's just so weird. It's like I gotta build something cool here. I gotta do something here.
Yeah, I had a similar issue that where I think I wanted to build, or I wanted to build my base, but I couldn't find a good planet. It was like this planet has burning hellstorms. This one is freezing cold. This one has aggressive sentinels. So I ended up having to build on a dead moon um, in that system. So there's like nothing on it, but I suppose plenty of space for building.
Nah, I
And
built
then
in
I
a
just
hellstorm with high sentinels. I did it anyway. But it was cool to watch the volcanoes grow and shrink. I mean, sure, my base is under constant threat, but I mean, the views you wouldn't believe.
stay for the views, try not to get melted.
Yeah, especially like when I brought the Gex on, because they're like the little bird amphibian looking people. I'm like, you are so out of it, dude. Stay in the building. You're the science advisor. Never go outside. Never go outside.
I don't know if you got far enough with it, but I found that everyone in my everyone who I added to my base has a really like sad story to them.
I haven't gotten that far, but I did get to a point where Gex was like, "Oh, I already made the payments in the future." And then like if you're like, I don't know if I want to hire you, he brings up like a sad memory of us watching each other grow old and dying together, and I was like, "What the The game's got some weird ideas behind it in its dialogue, which I really like because it keeps the whole thing like mysterious, but
Yeah, yeah, the writing is yeah, you like what is going on, and then but yeah, it adds to that element of well, I need to delve into it more. Like, am I going to find out what's going on here?
I do like one guy was really mad at me, and I was like, "What are you gonna do about it?" And I just lost health because he stabbed me in the dialogue system. I was like, "Okay, I guess that can happen. Great to know." But I think I literally he like had a sword, and I literally was like, "What are you gonna do with it?" And he just stabs me. So I guess that was my fault. Um, my other, do you like messing with like the learning the words and the dialogue system?
Yeah, I'm maybe not for all the species. I think I'm trying to. Is it the Viking, the big fighty ones? Um, I think because I landed in their system first, so I want to try and kind of go get all their words, and so if I'm in their system, I'll try and find all their knowledge stones and all this lot.
I did that with
But
the both the mechanical people and the Gex.
I mean, I will talk to them and stuff, but I'm less because otherwise it's just going to take too long for finding out what they're saying.
Well, you can build a thingy, an upgrade. So when you go into conversations, it'll randomly pick up words and translate them for you and add them to your thing permanently. So you can go and just
Ah,
go get in random conversations and passively learn words.
that's cool. Yeah, that'd definitely help.
But I really like so the area I'm in South Florida, right? So there's a huge Hispanic population around where I'm at. So a lot of times trying to communicate with people, sometimes you're just kind of like passively exchanging words that you both know in each other's language, but you don't fully know each other's language, and it's like a guessing game of what you can get. And I really liked how like passively picking up a word or two like really made me feel like just trying to interact with another person without the same language. It like recaptured that feel, and it really I think that was unironically when I first booted up No Man's Sky, that was like my favorite aspect was just learning from different cultures and slowly trying to passively learn the language.
Yeah, yeah, I definitely get that because I know that there's been some conversations I've had where I don't know all the words, but I know just enough to kind of um, get by.
Has that led to like any interesting um, interactions you've had with different people as you've like learned the language?
Not anything kind of not anything too um, out there really. Usually it's just been the kind of maybe someone's given me something because I've answered correctly. So, but not anything as exotic as being stabbed. Um, Whether or not it's because I know enough to have avoided that outcome. Um, but yeah, I think there's been things like where one of the mechanicals have said that he's like dying and he needs some organic matter to fuel himself. But I think I didn't actually have any at the time, so I had to give him something else, and he takes it and then just like depowers. It's like,
Oh, I've always felt so bad when that happens. I'm like, oh, son of a bitch.
I want to help you, but I can't. Yeah,
I got essentially the good ending. I was a Gex, and we didn't speak the same language, but for some of the words, I recognized what they were asking for, and I got it for him, and he was able to like because their whole thing is they're like hyper capitalist. So he was able to like buy some trade goods so he could start selling them to get off the planet that he crash landed on, and he ends up like the dialogue's like he can't express how happy he is, so he just hugs you and then like shakes your hand and walks off. And every time you talk to him, he like chirps and smiles and dances, and it's the cutest fucking thing in the world, and I've loved that. Like that's I don't know. There's the whole theme of the game being like you're a traveler in the universe, go meet people, and then you have that interesting dialogue system. I think really makes No Man's Sky stand out aside from just being a fun little base builder.
yeah,
What
and
was?
I think
Oh, sorry. Continue.
I was just going to say I just think it's brilliant how it's come on from essentially its start. Um, it had a very um, bad reception on launch, and it was one of them things where I'd never actually checked, but it's like how reviews are very much static. So I'm not even sure if you went on Metacritic and looked up No Man's Sky for the PC. I don't. Well, I suppose I could check now. What's the reviews like on that?
Well, when Steam they added the feature where you could see like overall reviews and then you could see most recent reviews. And it was really interesting to see like negative and mixed. And then most recent reviews it kind of became mixed or positive. And then slowly that became like very positive to the point that the overall score has now become very positive. So if you go and look at the Steam store, it's almost as if it's like cleared its like bad name with how many people have come and reviewed the game and said that it's like their new favorite thing.
Yeah, I just checked now. I think it's got 61% critics, 3.8% user score. So, if you didn't know about the history of it and you just went and looked at it, you'd be like, this game isn't that great. And whereas, it's a fantastic game. I mean, yeah, not for everyone, and it did have the issues on the launch, but now, what, 7 years later, um, I suppose it's
Yes,
more of a commentary on, reviews. That reviews are very much a slice in time. That should they potentially be reviewed every now and again.
I did like. I haven't watched it. I really like. There's a YouTube channel called Writing on Games. Um, he puts out like really, really good video essays, and he put out one like revisiting No Man's Sky 5 years later to talk about like how his relationship with the game changed. And I listened to him talk about that video on his podcast, and yeah, kind of what he got at was just how much like a game can evolve and become something completely different. Um, which is both good and bad because it kind of leads to a lot of like just broken shit on the platform that's supposed to get fixed later. Like Anthem was supposed to have a big roadmap, and then they just canceled the roadmap and abandoned even post development, which was kind of another sad development on that game.
Yeah, I think. Yeah, I mean, I to some extent want to say that I'm taking a No Man's Sky approach to Astra Protocol 2. That I'm because again, it's my hobby. I don't have to. Um, I don't have a bottom line at the end of it, and so I'm very much I'm willing to add more stuff to it to expand the experience, and I suppose to keep people interested in it. But then I suppose that there has to be that at least bottom line of you have to release a finished game, and that's the thing. Like when I released Astro Protocol, it was finished, but now I'm just adding things to enhance that. It doesn't, change the ending in any way, but it maybe changes how you get to the ending. Um, so yeah, I think there's no excuse for just saying, oh, we'll just patch in stuff to make it work. Um, but it's I suppose it's the DLC approach, but smaller chunks of DLC that you don't pay for.
Which always beneficial to the consumer. I mean, I still play Minecraft from time to time. They just put out another new patch where they added like a cherry blossom biome, and I was like, "That's it. I'm sold. I'm going back." Just for that, just for this stupid tree color. But it's a really interesting GDC talk where this guy's like how to be a game developer and make money and not have a single successful game. And his whole thing was that like over the years he'd put out like at this point like seven like or more games, but he'd always be putting out updates for his older games, and that would kind of keep the community going, and then would like have like create passive sales. So by constantly putting out updates for all the content he slowly built up, and through all the passive sales, that's able to sustain him to both put out more updates and um, put out new games, which I think is a really interesting way to think about game development from an indie perspective, because we don't really have the budgeting capabilities of something like EA.
Yeah, and I suppose the environment works for it. Like back in the day when stuff was on a disc, like we're talking about, I suppose PS2 and before. The game had to be done from that. Then you had the kind of the PS3 era where you'd have like day one patches, which got a bit maligned. Um, but that was, I think, very much you weren't releasing you weren't releasing a finished game. You had to have the day one patch to fix it. But now I think that yeah, people have definitely gone a bit more towards that. Um, not games as a service. I think that's a slightly different approach, but very much for people just adding bits. And I suppose yeah, you are right. It is the indies that can do that. It's there's the people that I suppose buy in at the start, so that can give it that boost of funding, which allows the indies to then work on the next thing and essentially keep the game alive. Whereas I suppose your bigger platforms might be a bit more like, well, we've got all our money here, now work on the next completely different project.
It's it's also weird how it's kind of created an attitude where like in some games it's kind of expected. I haven't played Halo 5 myself, so I'm like an outsider, but it's like a lot of people were complaining there wasn't enough content being added going forward. And I was just thinking how like that's a really almost odd sentiment, um considering it was just the full multiplayer for Halo 5 was just given out for free. Like if they never put out any other updates or patches for multiplayer in Halo 1, I don't think people would have complained too much, but I guess that's just the player experience has changed so much. That and they've added the season passes and battle passes and all that bullshit. I'm sure that also changes your attitude.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I suppose it just does the change in appetites for what people expect and um, what they get.
It That was one thing that I was big into Mordhau for a little bit. You ever heard of Mordhau?
Not, I don't think so.
Do you know Mountain Blade?
No.
Chivalry?
Yes, I've
Mordhau
heard of
is
it.
just chivalry, but like slightly different combat mechanics. Um,
Right.
but people were complaining that like, oh, there's not enough updates coming out. The community's gonna die because it's a multiplayer game. You has to have things to get people in. So you got to balance that. But also, I'm sitting there on the side like, I don't know, man. They made a game. They put it out for like $40. It's great. They made a complete experience. You can't really demand more for free. Um, it's very very strange to me. I guess times are changing.
But then I can even remember when people were saying that mobile games were going to kill console gaming. So yeah, there's all these different things that happen and change, and um, who knows what the next big thing's going to be.
The metaverse, baby. Here we go. Crypto, blockchain, NFTs.
Oh, don't mention crypto. I don't know if you're aware of this, but my game's called Astra Protocol. There's a crypto called Astra Protocol.
Oh, really?
I'm pretty sure when I made Astra Protocol 1, I checked. I mean, I didn't check very hard. I did a quick Google of the term Astra Protocol because I thought, oh, it's a nice spacey. It sounds spacey. It sounds science fictiony. So I made that. Um, and then I noticed. I think sometime last year, I noticed the cryptocurrency. Um, and obviously that's got more interest behind it because it's crypto, and I had a few people commenting on my videos saying like, "Oh, when can I get an invite?" And I was like, "The game's available for free. What do you mean?" And then I realized that they were talking about the crypto, um, and it even led to an incident where I think I posted a video on. I was trying to use Facebook, so we had a Facebook page for the game, and I posted an update. And I think shortly after I posted that, a member of the Trump administration joined this cryptocurrency. And I'm not going to drag politics into this, so I'm not going to say either way on this. But I think someone wasn't happy that a member of the Trump administration had joined this cryptocurrency, and I had a very angry message on this game video about this joining, and I was just a bit like, this is a space game. It's nothing to do with politics. So so yeah, and then I thought, oh, Astra Protocol 2, at least at least then the two will slightly differentiate me from crypto. And now I think they've released an Astra Protocol 2 token or second edition or
Oh
something.
no.
So I thought I was free because if you at least searched Astra Protocol 2 in quotes, we'd be distinct. But now I think the crypto is starting to creep into there as well. Um, I think my only solace is I'm kind of hoping that someone might search for the cryptocurrency, stumble upon our space game, and go, "Oh well, I like space games and I like cryptocurrency, so I'll play this game." But none of the crypto money's definitely come my way yet. But you can always hope.
Well, if it makes you feel better, when I was looking up help guides for your game, I didn't see the cryptocurrency pop up. So the search algorithm seems to favor you.
Oh, that's good then.
Um, that's funny. I mean, I think most people don't like any of that shit, but I the fact that you have a very hyper specific vendetta against it because of fucking copyright bullshit. Oh, that's too much. Well, I think I've got enough interesting story here. I think we could, wrap it up. So, Dan, where can people find you and find your game?
Yeah, so you can find me mainly on Twitter, and I will just double check my handle. I'm giving you the right one. It is SliceBar Games. So twitter.com/SliceBar Games. Um, we also have a lot of other socials, but Twitter is the one that I'm most active on. We have a website, slicebar.games, where there's also links to a mailing list, which is my attempt at trying to get a bit more of a community. So if you like the sort of the stuff that we're talking about and working on, if you sign up to that. Other than that, the game is available. So Astra Protocol 1 is available on itch. Just search Astra Protocol, hopefully it should come up. And Astra Protocol 2 is available on both itch and Steam. It's and again, I believe it's the only game called Astra Protocol 2 on Steam, so you should hopefully be able to find it there.
All right, I'll make sure to link all the socials. you can follow me here on the YouTube channel or follow me on Twitter at Official Paper Prototypes. And I think that's it. I'll make sure to link all that and the cryptocurrency. So see you guys on the next episode. Later. Sorry, I did the thing where I dropped the call instead of closing the recording.